This small girl has a giant as her friend, and she convinces the queen to allow her giant in the palace. And the queen agrees, and the giant is treated specially with a spade for fork and a shovel for spoon. He eats funny, and the giant also offers everyone his drink, and as they all drink it, they all farted heavily. Welcome to Movie Mix Recap. Please subscribe to enjoy more movie recaps. The story begins with a small girl from an orphanage home in London. The streets silent and dark with a clock tower. The orphanage, a grim brick building with barred windows, stands in shadow. Inside, 10-year-old Sophie lies awake in a narrow bed, her face illuminated by moonlight. She tiptoes to the window, drawn by an unnatural rustling below. Peering through the glass, she freezes. A towering figure moves through the mist. To her surprise, it was a giant with a tattered coat and a lantern glowing with eerie green light. His hands, larger than her entire body, clutch a mysterious sack. She stays there scared and couldn't move, and before she can scream, the giant spots her. His eyes widen in panic. The giant's massive hand crashes through the window, snatching Sophie mid-fall as she tried to go back to bed. The world blurs, wind roars in her ears, street lamps streak into golden lines, and the orphanage shrinks to a speck below. The giant bounds across rooftops, his strides shaking chimneys. Sophie clutches his thumb, torn between terror and awe. They cross a desolate moor, then a churning sea, giant country. The giant deposits Sophie in a cavernous cave cluttered with bizarre objects. Shelves of glowing jars, a colossal stove, and a murky pool. He reveals himself as the big friendly giant BFG, explaining he took her to prevent exposure. His voice rumbles with melancholy. He offers her a grotesque vegetable, a rotten cucumber which he calls snozcumber, but Sophie recoils at its stench. Outside, the ground trembles as monstrous laughter echoes. The BFG hurriedly hides Sophie under a blanket, whispering, "Them giants is nastier than a rotten tooth." A hulking giant with blood-stained teeth, he is way bigger than the BFG. He is called Flesh Lump Peter. He barges into the cave. He sniffs the air, accusing the BFG of hiding human beings. Sophie runs and hides in the rotten cucumber. The BFG deflects and unknowingly offers the same cucumber, which Flesh Lump Peter hurls aside in disgust. As he leaves, he threatens to devour the BFG next. Sophie, trembling under the blanket, watches the BFG slump in relief. The BFG takes Sophie to a surreal valley where glowing orbs, dreams, float like fireflies. With a butterfly net, he captures a golden dream, explaining he delivers them to sleeping children. Sophie spots a dark, thorny orb, a nightmare. The BFG warns her away. The BFG traps it, his face grim. "Bad uns stick to your bones," he mutters. Returning to the cave, the BFG reveals the other giants have left to hunt humans. Sophie's blanket slips from her grasp. The BFG panics. Flesh Lump Peter will recognize the scent. He catapults Sophie back to London, his eyes filled with regret. She wakes up in front of the orphanage and calls for the giant, but she gets no reply. She then plummets toward the orphanage. But he catches her at the last moment, relenting. Then he takes her back with him. Later on, the man-eating giants storm the BFG's cave, tearing apart furniture and smashing dream jars. Sophie hides in a teapot, her heartbeat deafening. The BFG fends them off with a red-hot poker, but Blood Bottler finds her blanket. The giants vow to return at dawn. Sophie discovers a dusty portrait of Queen Victoria in the BFG's belongings. An idea forms. She convinces the BFG to forge a nightmare for the queen. They collect ingredients in dream country, a child's scream, a soldier's courage, and Sophie's own fear. The BFG brews a swirling black nightmare in a colossal jar. Under the cover of night, the BFG cradles Sophie in his palm as they traverse London's sleeping streets. And finally, Buckingham Palace loom beneath them as they approach the Queen's bedroom. He unscrews the nightmare jar, releasing the inky vapor into the air. The nightmare snakes through a half-open window, coiling around the Queen's four-poster bed. Inside, the Queen twitches, her face contorting as the vision unfolds. Dawn breaks. The queen, pale and shaken, summons her staff. Sophie perches on the windowsill, revealed by the morning light. The BFG crouches in the palace garden, partially hidden by rose bushes, his enormous ears twitching nervously. Guards rush in, rifles raised, but the queen halts them with a raised hand. Sophie explains the giant's threat, her voice steady despite the chaos. The BFG steps forward, his shadow engulfing the courtyard. A corgi barks, a maid faints. The queen, regaining composure, invites them to breakfast. In the grand dining hall, the BFG sits awkwardly on a reinforced bench, grand piano to serve as his chair, and repurpose a large table as his dining surface. The BFG sits and is presented with an oversized set of cutlery and a massive teacup to match his proportions. He presents frobskottel, a green, fizzy drink, in a vase-sized bottle. The queen sips cautiously, her eyebrows rising at the sweet flavor. Moments later, the frobskottel's side effect begins. A chorus of high-pitched whiz-poppers, the BFG's term for fart, erupts from the staff, the dogs, and the queen. The queen, amused but focused, agrees to mobilize the military. Military helicopters roar over the English Channel, the BFG clinging to a cargo net strung between two aircraft. Sophie peers down at the churning sea, clutching the nightmare jar. The BFG points to a jagged island ahead, giant country. Below, the man-eating giants lounge in a bone-strewn clearing. The nightmare bursts from the trumpet, a swirling black cloud that engulfs the giants. They writhe, hallucinating their victims rising as vengeful specters. Flesh-lump Peter alone resists, swatting the nightmare away with a roar. The giants stagger, disoriented as helicopters descend. Soldiers unleash massive nets, ensnaring the howling beasts. The captured giants are airlifted to a volcanic island, where snozcumber seeds are dropped for them to farm. The BFG watches from a distance, his expression bittersweet. Back at Buckingham Palace, Sophie bids him farewell. The queen adopts her, gifting a sunlit suite overlooking the gardens. The BFG returns to his cave, now quiet and empty. He arranges salvaged dream jars, pausing at one labeled Sophie's First Dream. Months later, Sophie stands at her palace window, clutching the tattered blanket. She whispers into the night, "Thank you, BFG." In Giant Country, the BFG pauses his work, ears perking up. He smiles, a small, sad curve of his lips, and resumes writing their story in a leather-bound book.
If you enjoyed this video, please do well to like, subscribe, and comment on what movies you want us to review for you. Also, turn on the notification bell icon so you don't miss any of our videos. Thanks, and see you in the next video.